Thanks everyone for joining us today for this AMA. At Blocklete Games, we have Tyler and John. Tyler is creative director with the game, and John was one of the founders of GigLabs and worked very close with some of the early strategy and concepts of Blocklete Games. So why don't we start out with you guys just introducing yourselves a little bit and what you do with this project and in general. John, why don't we start off with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I am John Parisi. I'm one of the co-founders of GigLabs. GigLabs is a technology company that supports brands in coming into the NFT space. We, uh, started the company back in like late 2017. So we've sort of been in and around this NFT space for some time, and sort of in that time, we launched a number of different projects, different blockchain related projects. We sort of gravitated pretty quickly to NFTs, really like in early 2018, and really around gaming at first. That was sort of like the really jumping off point for us in NFTs. It was definitely like my first uh, kind of avenue into blockchain, and being able to like understand what NFTs are and what they could mean and what they could do, was around gaming. So we launched a game called Crypto Realm, sort of like as our first proof of concept. We uh, really kind of tested a lot of different things with that game. Um, Upgradable tokens, composable tokens. We created a marketplace to trade goods, which coincident or kind of interestingly is almost like Uniswap before Uniswap. Um, so we really kind of just tested a lot of different things with that game. Uh, the game itself is fine; it still exists and works. But we kind of used that as a way to prove this concept out of like NFTs and games and the different things it can do, and that caught the attention of Turner Sports, and we were an Atlanta-based company, same as Turner, and I can kind of go back into like the how it all started, but essentially, like we formed this relationship with the team there who was looking to try something new and really innovative, and we became the technology partner for what turned out to be Blocklete Games. It was in the arena sports for a while there when it first launched. But we really are the lead technology partner. Have really been focused on the blockchain side of things. And just by way of background, I'm not I'm not a developer. I'm not the one who's writing this code or writing smart contracts, but I'm definitely familiar with everything we've done with Blocklete Games up to this point.
Thanks, John.
Hey,
Go ahead, DC.
yep, sure. Hey, Taylor. Hey, Life Baller. Nick, thanks for having me. I am Tyler. I am a creative. I work currently as a creative director. I started in print pharmaceutical, and then I moved to physical event spaces, and then ultimately I found my home in virtual worlds. And I wish I found Gig Labs sooner because there's some very exciting opportunities in front of us. So, I came to Gig Labs as a result of working on this project with you all at Turner Sports. I started at Bleacher Report and sort of found a home at Gig Labs, and am excited to see where this, Block Lead adventure goes.
So, Tyler, I know for you it's interesting because you're creative director of GigLabs now, and you worked also on Blocklete Games when you were where I am at, Warner Media, News and Sports, or Turner Sports. And I don't know if you want to share a bit more about how this project sort of came to you and how you got involved with it on Turner side, and then how you sort of continue forward with creative over at GigLabs.
Yeah, for sure. I have to think about it. I think it feels like forever ago, even though it really wasn't. But in this space, everything moves so quickly. I think, it came about as a result of being in the physical event space. I started there on that team at Bleacher Report, working closely with an individual named Tyler Stewart. And this opportunity sort of came to us as this merger happened between sort of Warner and Bleacher and AT&T and all that, and we had this event coming up, and we were just dabbling in NFTs. I mean, John and GigLabs and all those guys were doing NFTs years before Bleacher Report even knew what the acronym meant. But there was this opportunity we had basically to do these sets of virtual basketballs, that ended up selling. The highest one was like $60,000, which is kind of mind blowing for something that you can't actually physically touch or dribble. But it was these set of basketballs around this event we were doing, and we had so much success there. I mean, that's where I caught the bug. And then we heard, I believe, from Yang, who I think everybody obviously knows, about you guys had been sort of working on this for a while, and then it had sort of changed hands a few times in terms of visual direction, and there was an opportunity there, having caught the NFT bug, to be able to come into the space and then sort of leave my mark on Blocklete, and I'm glad I did, because it sort of opened a lot of doors, and that sort of led us to today, in which now, in my capacity at GigLabs, sort of advising on visuals, in terms of like visual strategy and NFT drops and all that. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going to be happening this year. We're already working with a lot of huge names in this space, and so I look forward to sort of continuing to be able to sort of innovate in such a space that encourages that kind of innovation, because oftentimes we're bound by physical limitations in terms of events and in real world applications, but we're not in terms of the blockchain. So a lot of interesting opportunities.
Thanks. And a quick sort of question for John, as we're talking about sort of Yang and the formation of Blocklete Games here. And for those of you interested in a little more backstory about Yang and sort of how it's formed internally at Turner Sports, ideation and philosophy around it, we do have that AMA up on our Blocklete Games YouTube page. But for John, I did want to ask a bit more for you, as you were here, before Tyler and myself in the early days, when you started talking with the Turner Sports team about NFT games, NFTs, and all those pieces. Sort of how did strategy for what is now Blocklete Golf and Blocklete Games in general emerge? Were there some sort of, did it take a while to sort of come to the point, or what were some of the key things both you and the team over here at Turner Sports were discussing coming up with that strategy?
We, in particular, me and one of our other co-founders, Brian Burns, we had been attending some meetups, some of the more like blockchain meetups around Atlanta, and one woman in particular who used to work at Turner Sports said, "Oh, I would love to have you guys come and do like it's almost like a lunch and learn, I guess, type thing at Turner Sports." And just tell everyone about your game, that crypto roam game. Tell everyone about the game. Just kind of like talk about NFTs and like what they could do for gaming. So we went there, and there were, I don't know, like 15 people there in the audience or something like that. And I remember that's when I first met Yang. It was like he was in the back, and he kind of approached us and said, I've been thinking about this for some time. We're really interested in exploring like what a proof of concept could look like for a game, and basically as creating like a new channel for them to work with their league partners. They're managing web media, social, and so like, what does it mean if we can also offer this like NFT game? And of course, like that was way too early for any of these leagues. It was like before Top Shot, right? So nobody was really thinking about this, but there was some foresight within the organization, and also like this appetite to take a bit of a risk and see like what would this proof of concept look like. And so we settled on a golf game. I think like horse racing was discussed at some point, but it really was like we want to create a really simple game that leverages this technology. We were not, at least at that point, we weren't trying to compete on creating this like AAA game, but rather like differentiating the whole project by the fact that these were NFTs, right? You own the golfer, and so the the things we applied early on that we wanted to make sure were a part of this game was one that this character that you bought or this athlete you bought was something you own. Two is you could train with it, you could improve it really through gameplay, not through what you might see in like the current model from most mobile app games where you could play and grind, but you could also just like buy your way to the top. Well, this was really like it's really about playing and improving your golfer and hopefully improving the value of the golfer. And then really it was like, and this is where I think it's so interesting where this game is going, is really like building out an economy around the whole thing. And that takes a lot of time. There was a lot of discussions around how fast could someone improve, and a lot of modeling exercises around if you win this many medals in an event, is that too many? Like, how does that translate over into skill points? So there was like all these conversations happening, but really it was like let's use NFTs as the foundation of this game, and then build the whole experience around it, fully knowing that the game was going to continue to evolve. And I think that's like a really cool thing to think about with NFTs, especially like as technology improves, right? Like gameplay is going to improve. And the fact that you could take these golfers that you bought maybe 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, yeah. Take these golfers that you bought and play them not only in like version 1 of the game, but version 2 and version 3. And if you think about, I'm going back to like when I was in my 20s, or like in college, I played a ton of Tiger Woods golf, tons of it. I loved that game. And like, I couldn't take my golfer from one game to the next. And that was just always a very cool idea for me. And it was definitely like something that we thought about when initially designing in the arena sports, and also in what's now, I guess, Blocklete Games.
It's neat for me to hear you talk about that sort of early economy balancing, because that's actually one of the big things we're internally discussing now as we approach to sort of launch in the app stores and make the game available to everyone, is how do we sort of balance the economy there to make sure people are incentivized to play, and there's a right balance of how long it takes to level up your golfers. So that's a continuing discussion. So that one's always tricky. One thing is you talked about sort of the golfers 2 years ago being able to play now, and for those who've been around for the whole journey, there's definitely been a revamp of the creative look and the way the whole way as we move to a mobile game, and all the golfers are different, and we handled that migration. And a question for you, Tyler, around that topic is, you're one of the people who was there sort of during that conversion of when we changed that golfer look from a sort of slightly more realistic 2D look to now what we have with 3D and more stylized. Do you want to sort of talk a bit about how you came up with the new look and how that change went?
Sure. So yeah, I think the previous look can kind of be best described as like that Flash player era. I think many of us are probably old enough to kind of remember the kind of aesthetic and style that was relevant then, and it certainly had its place. But when this conversation happened about coming on board to kind of take a look and see what was possible, I think we really wanted to sort of get a better understanding of what was happening in the space itself. And so, we took a look at the landscape, and that was the time when, and still is the time, frankly, that PFPs were kind of huge. And so there was a lot of material for us to look at in terms of what people were buying and what was working and what wasn't. So we took a look at a lot of examples within the space, many of which are no longer around, unfortunately, just as is the nature of the space. But it was that kind of visual language we wanted to sort of make sure and make certain was present in something that was going to be represented on the blockchain, and not just on the blockchain, but literally in the name of the game, right? That block piece of Blocklete is a reference to the blockchain. So it was important to us that that visual aesthetic came through. And now on that other side of that, was, I am a child of Nintendo, something I grew up with, everything from Super Nintendo to Nintendo 64, so on and so forth. So for me, it was, as I said previously, it's kind of like honoring my digital elders, if you will, right? And sort of taking that kind of Nintendo philosophy about what was playful and worked in that space and kind of marrying that to what we were trying to do in the blockchain space. Because I think, and I don't want to misquote Yang or misattribute this to him, but I think it was important that we made something that was accessible. So it wasn't just about the early adopters, but it was about creating something that everybody could understand and participate and play with. And then in terms of the architecture and how we thought about it, looking at these sort of procedural avatar projects was, you know, we wanted to represent a full golfer, right? And we wanted to do it in a way that made sense and was easy for us on a programming standpoint to be able to build. So we really, what I'm calling like Mr. Potato Head architecture, like Lego architecture, where you have a clear delineation between like three zones, for example, right? So you've got your face, your torso, and your legs and feet. And so if you think about like a little Lego piece, that's like the standard architecture, but then depending on the theme of the Lego set, the head can swap out for a different character, or so can the torso, legs, so on and so forth. So all of those considerations sort of went into building the characters, and that was just one piece of it, right? And the other pieces was trying to figure out, okay, we've now got the visual language for the characters, but now we need to think about the world in which they live. And again, that's another piece that was super informed by the sort of giants that came before us, right? In terms of Nintendo was a big reference point. And you look at something like Super Mario Brothers or Super Smash Brothers, something like that. These landscapes and visuals that we sort of paid homage to, and some of the geometries that we brought into the landscape. And then the other piece on that is that again, coming from this event background of physical, being bound by physical limitations and cost and all that stuff, we're in a space now where there is no, the limit is your imagination. So we thought, okay, let's give everybody, because it's a golf game, let's give them the first level will be a golf level that's easy to understand, right? That transition. Like John said, you played golf games, everyone's played golf games. That makes sense. But then because we're in this blockchain space, for that next level or the one after that, let's kind of embrace the chaos of virtual world. So, I think you start to see things like outer space or lava or things like that, where, you can't traditionally do like in a big box golf game. You're not going to see Tiger Woods sort of floating in space, although it would be pretty cool, but you're probably not going to see that. So it was that combination that I think really made this game special. And to your point, it was coming out of that 2D and going into something three-dimensional, which I think was super important for us to convey.
Thanks, Tyler. And for the folks joining us, I see we got a few new names in the audience. If you guys have any questions for Tyler, John, or myself, feel free to either request to speak here, and we can move you and you can ask your question via audio, or if you're more comfortable, just throw it in the live stream chat channel right above in text, and we'll make sure we include you. We've got a few more minutes here, so if you guys have questions, we can be sure to cover those specifically. Or if you come with them later, you can always toss them in Discord, and we'll catch them and get to you at a convenient time then. For John, another sort of thing I've always been curious about is, you've worked on a lot of different NFT projects now, and like you said, started talking with the team over here at Turner Sports around 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago actually. 2 years is when the first people were able to buy the new product. From sort of the interaction with Turner Sports and sort of the larger company mindset and working on Blocklete Games throughout that process, are there things that have sort of you've taken or learned and applied to some of the other projects you've worked with, and what are some, I guess, the key learnings or key coolest things you discovered through working with Blocklete Games?
I know, like, one of the reasons we all liked Blocklete Games from the beginning, and why gaming is such like a cool use case for NFTs is the utility, and that's like something that we talk about quite a bit with NFTs. And so, like, to be able to apply that across like all these other NFT projects that are emerging, that's like often like the question people have is like, well, what does this do? Like, what does this mean? In the case of Blocklete Games, it's you get this ability to play with your character, and you can improve it and eventually sell it potentially. All these other projects, it's maybe it's community, maybe it's early access to future drops. There's all this like cool stuff you can do with NFTs, and so from our perspective as a technology company, it's not just like what is the utility, but how do we build it in a way like from like a platform perspective that allows like more companies to launch projects that have this utility sort of baked in. And so that's sort of, I would say, one of the key things that we talked about uh, with Blocklete Games and how we're applying it now. The other thing sort of is in reference to what Tyler was talking about. I mean, when we launched it, we made it a requirement to have, even though the art was like, guess kind of basic, every golfer was different. So we were doing this really early on, and so this was before people were like trying to discover rare traits, and we weren't. We're kind of following a little bit like CryptoKitties model, I guess, but we were doing this all like um, uh, in a way that is more reflective of what a lot of the projects are looking like today. So very proud of like where we started uh, and where this thing is going, because I think again like Tyler's creative is definitely stepping this up to another level.
Thanks. And it looks like we have a question from Lifeballer around sort of the combination of partnerships involved in Blocklete Games. I can cover that at a sort of a high level where, Blocklete Games is sort of a Turner Sports property developed in partnership and close collaboration with GigLabs, and as John's talking about in sort of season one, both from the game side and the blockchain side. And sort of the new app, we've also been working with a company called Sumo on the game development side for the app versus, as opposed to the web game. I guess if you have sort of two-part question for you, John, if you have any more sort of detail on how that worked in sort of season one and the earlier days of Blockletes, and also sort of Lifeball's other question is more for you as well about sort of strategy about onboarding NFT collectors, people who are already in that space, and how that's different from trying to get new entrants to the NFT space with a specific
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, those are awesome questions. So on the GigLabs sort of relationship with Blockletes, at the early onset, man, it was a scrappy team over at Turner, and we were equally scrappy, and so we were, it was a proof of concept, and so we were doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the technology and back end side, and, as well as game development. That early game that was out there. Fortunately for everyone, Sumo's come in and it's on the game development side, and really what we're doing now is like playing a bigger role on like the blockchain, smart contracts, that economy side of the game that's going to be developed, as well as the API development, so that the game, the app itself, can read ownership of tokens, and we can write the improvements to the golfer from the mobile app, which is pretty cool. And I think as far as like onboarding goes, from like the NFT collector, from like for non-NFT collectors, this is where I think Flow becomes like huge as a blockchain. They make the onboarding, like, we try to make it very simple. There's no need to really educate people on storing a seed phrase, getting crypto. You can just kind of get started right away. If anyone was like around the game from like the early days, we actually built a custody wallet so that people could onboard and join the game without needing any knowledge about blockchain. This opened up some challenges, right? Because eventually people would want to get their own wallet, so we'd have to transfer those NFTs out of their custody wallet. Anyway, we don't need to do any of that stuff with Flow, right? Like you can get their wallet set up right away, and it's really straightforward. And then as far as like NFT collectors, like I don't know, like what are a lot of NFT collectors in it for, right? Like they're in it to flip. If you want to like categorize the group as one group, I think they're looking for value, and so I know like a lot of the marketplace features now are going to be showing a lot more of like that historical value of the NFTs, really tracking marketplace metrics, and like creating new ways for people to discover, like the quote unquote rare traits, and making that marketplace experience really high level from where it's been.
Yeah, and I think one of the other real big advantages of when we come out in the App Store to that sort of onboarding aspect is, people still have to set up the wallet, but then the purchase process once you have your wallet connected with your account will be very similar to what a lot of sort of mainstream casual gamers on apps are used to, where they'll use their whatever payment process they have set up with Apple or Android to buy the Blocklete bucks, and they can use those to buy a character, and it's much more of a that sort of process of buying the golfers through the app will be much more similar to what a non-NFT casual gamer is used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're sort of out of time here. I guess Tyler and John, do you guys have any sort of final thoughts or questions for each other?
TC, what do you got?
Nothing real. I just want to say thank you, I guess, to everybody who has, to everybody who has been with the game forever, and for the individuals that are just getting started. It means a lot that you're taking the time. I know this landscape is one that's incredibly varied, and there's a new project every day, and it's almost impossible, at least I know for me, to manage my Discord in any sort of efficient way. So the fact that you're here means a lot, and I really look forward to sort of what you can do in the game, and hopefully you can also get some wins and make some money along the way.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is you hear this phrase quite a bit, and even though like NFTs are having like their moment in the sun, and I think it's only going to get bigger from here. It is still like incredibly early, and what what we've done and what the Blocklete team has done, it's incredibly ambitious. Um, there haven't, I mean, outside of like Axie Infinity, there really aren't any games that have like taken off yet, and I think um, the team behind this has been very committed to this vision of NFT gaming, like as like other projects like this, especially like the PFP craze has hit. It's like no, we're going to continue focused on building out a game and building utility in NFTs, and I still think it's really early. Like I've often said, like I really believe this is the future of gaming. Like NFTs are going to become a part of all games. It's going to take time because the business model for these gaming companies is just so good right now. It's really there's the motivation to just like change things over to NFTs is not going to happen overnight. But it's going to take projects like this. It's going to take consumer demand and like people like basically taking their attention away from like these free to play games that you might like waste time on, and I'm guilty of it too. But dedicating more of your time towards projects like this, and once more gaming companies take notice and see that shift happen, I just think everything's going to kind of shift very quickly once that starts to take place. But it's not going to happen overnight, and it's I still think we're really early, and I'm really proud of this team, and like to be committed to this vision. And for Turner Sports in general, like it's pretty awesome that like the team over there has stayed committed to this, and is really you know committed to driving a lot of innovation in the space. So really excited for this next phase of Blocklete Games, and I think it's only going to get bigger and bigger over time.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us, John and TC, and we'll toss this up on YouTube and make sure that folks know we're able to join us today, where to find it. And thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see y'all next time.
Cool.